You think a candle is a small thing, a flame you cup against the wind, a comfort you light at a graveside, a prayer you leave burning while you sleep. It is not a small thing. On this world, it is the only thing, and every candle that burns in the great cathedral above was once a person who came here believing they would be saved. So here's the question I have carried for 40 years, the question I have never said aloud until now. What do you do when you learn that the light you have tended your whole life is fed on the people who came to pray by it? My name is Orin Vael. I am a tallow chandler of the third rendering vault, as my mother was before me and her father before her, back 300 years to the founding of the deep works. I have made more candles than there are stars I will never see, and I have only just begun to understand what I was making. Let me tell you where I live so you can understand the shape of my days. The shrine world of Cathedral is a single cathedral the size of a mountain range, and it has been growing for 9,000 years. The faithful come from 100 systems to die here, because to die on Cathedral and be interred in its walls is to lie forever in the saint's light. The pilgrim fleets never stop arriving, the bells never stop ringing, and far beneath the singing nave, beneath the ossuaries and the crypts and the bone galleries where the dead are stacked like cordwood, there are the vaults. I have spent my life in the third of them. It is a hall of black iron, longer than I have ever walked in a single shift, lined with rendering vats, taller than dwellings, fed by brass pipes that sweat and tick through the cold hours. Sodium lamps hang from chains in the dark and give a light the color of old teeth. The air is thick with steam and the smell which I will not describe to you because you have never smelled it, and I would not give it to you if I could. We are perhaps 200 souls down here, though I have never counted and no one has ever told me. We tend the vats, we render the dead, we make the light. You learn a place by its sounds when you cannot see the end of it. The third vault has 3 sounds, and they never stop. There's the tick of the cooling pipes, slow and irregular, like a clock that has forgotten how to keep time. There's the breath of the furnaces below the floor, a long, low exhale that you feel in the soles of your feet before you hear it. And there is the drip, always the drip. Tallow finding its way down the channels, fat falling into the catch trays, the patient music of the work. When I was a boy, I was afraid of the silence between the drips. I am a man now, and I am still afraid of it, because the only time the dripping stops is when something has gone wrong, and on Cathedral, a thing that has gone wrong is a thing that someone will be blamed for. The cold lives in the iron, and the iron is everywhere. We wear it down, the cold does, the way water wears down stone. You do not feel it arrive. You feel that you have always been cold and will always be cold, and that warmth is a story told about the upper world, like the sky. Old chandlers walk bent, all of us, curled around the cold we carry in our chests. I am bent now. I was straight once. I do not remember when that changed. The dead give their light. We tend the flame. The flame must never gutter. My mother taught me those words before she taught me my own name. I believed they were a prayer. I have learned they are an instruction. The work itself is simple, and that is its mercy. A simple thing can be done by a tired man, by a grieving man, by a man who has stopped thinking. I have been all 3. The bodies come down by the cartload on the rail from the upper crypts, wrapped in gray shrouds, stamped with the seal of the mortuary clergy. We unwrap them, we weigh them, because everything here is weighed. We lower them into the rendering vats, and we feed the furnaces beneath, and we stir. The stirring is mine. I have a pole of blackened ferrous metal as long as 3 men, and I lean my whole weight against it, and I walk the slow circle around the lip of the vat, and the fat rises, and I skim it, and it is poured off into the cooling channels where it whitens and stiffens into tallow. The bone goes to the meal grinders, the ash goes to the fields that no one I know has ever seen. Nothing is wasted on Calenhot. To waste the dead would be a blasphemy, and there are no blasphemies here, only quotas. There is a craft to it that no one above would credit. The fat must be skimmed at the right heat, or it carries too much water and the candle spits and drowns its own flame. Too hot and it scorches, and the tallow goes brown and bitter, and the high clergy send it back with a mark of displeasure that costs the whole vault a portion of its ration. You learn the heat by the color of the steam and the smell of the rising scum, and you learn it in your first 10 years, or you do not learn it at all. My mother could read a vat the way the upper clergy read their scripture. She would lean over the lip with her eyes half closed and breathe in once and say, "Not yet," and she was never wrong. I can do it now. I did not think I would ever be able to, and then one day I could, and she was already too sick to see it, and I have never told anyone that the last thing I wanted in the world was for my mother to watch me read a vat and say nothing, because nothing from her was the highest praise there was. I was 9 years old when my mother first put the pole in my hands. My palms blistered and burst and blistered again until they grew the hard yellow shell they wear now. She told me the blisters were the saint testing my devotion. I believed her. I had no reason not to. A child believes the walls of the only room he has ever known. I stirred for 31 years before I learned what was in the warm vat, but I am getting ahead of myself, and this is a story that must be told slow, the way the tallow cools, or it will not set right. I had a family in the way that people down here have families. My wife was named Sarah. She came from the wick galleries, where they spin the cotton and the corpse hair into the cords that carry the flame. We were matched by the guild when I was 22, because a chandler must marry a wick spinner, because the work must continue, and the work needs both. I will not pretend it was love at first, because love is a word the upper world can afford, and we could not, but it became love. It became the deepest thing I have known. We learned each other the way you learn a tool, until her hands and mine moved without asking, and the silence between us was full instead of empty. We had a son. We named him Bremen after my mother's father, whose portrait hangs in the wall shrine of our dwelling among the melted stubs of the candles we have burned for our own dead. Bremen had his mother's careful hands and my bad knees and a way of looking at a thing too long, as though he could see the inside of it. I thought that would make him a good chandler. I have since wondered if it only made him a man who could not stop looking until he saw the truth, and I do not know whether to be proud or to grieve. We ate together every shift end at a small iron table by the light of one lamp, because lamp oil is rationed, and we are the people who make the light, and we are not permitted to waste it. There is a joke in that. I have never found it funny. The dead give their light. We tend the flame. The flame must never gutter. Sarah kept a small thing alive in our dwelling that I have never seen anywhere else in the vaults. A scrap of green, a cutting of some pale moss she had coaxed from the damp of the wick galleries, grown in a cracked ration tin on a shelf near the one warm pipe, fed with the dregs of our water. It was not beautiful. It was barely alive. But it was the only living green thing in 300 years of my family's world, and she tended it the way the clergy above tend their saint. And when she died, I found that I could not water it, and I could not let it die. And it sat there going brown for a year while I failed it in both directions. Brahman saved it in the end. He has his mother's hands. We said it before every meal, the three of us, the way the upper world says grace. Brahman used to mouth the words without sound when he was small and thought I could not see. I should have asked him then what he was thinking. I did not. We do not ask each other things down here. It is how we survive each other. There is a rhythm to a rendering vault, and once it is in you, it never leaves. The klaxon wakes us at the fourth bell, though we cannot hear the bells, only the klaxon that stands in for them. We eat a paste of recycled protein that I have long suspected is the same protein I helped to make, and I have long chosen not to follow that suspicion to its end. We walk to our stations in the dark. We work 12 hours by the tally engine's count. We walk home in the dark. We sleep. The klaxon wakes us at the fourth bell. On rest days, which come 1 in 7, we do not rest. We pull wicks. The whole vault gathers in the cooling halls where the candles stand in their thousands on the iron racks, cooling and setting, rank on rank into the gloom, more candles than you have seen in your life, multiplied by every day of mine. And we thread the wicks by hand, and we trim them, and we sort the candles by length and by grade, because the cathedral above burns different candles for different rites, and a chandler must know them all. There are 9 grades, and a chandler must know them by weight and by feel in the dark. The common candles, pale and quick, burned by the million in the side chapels for the prayers of the poor. The vigil candles, squat and steady, that must burn unattended for 100 hours, without drowning. The feast candles, tall as my forearm, dense as soapstone, that the high clergy carry in the great processions on the days of obligation. There is a candle for the naming of the newly devout, and a candle for the dying, and a candle, thin as a reed, that is burned only once a year, and only one of them. And I have made that candle 11 times in my life, and I do not know to this day what rite it serves. We make them. We do not attend them. The light goes up and we stay down, and what is done with the light is not a chandler's business. The long, pale ones are for the common prayers. The tall ones, dense and slow-burning, are for the high feasts, and then there are the ones we are not permitted to touch with bare hands, the ones that come from the warm vat, that go up in a sealed cart with 2 of the mortuary clergy walking beside it. We called those the saints' own candles. We did not ask what made them different. I have told you. We do not ask. I pulled wicks beside my son for the last time on a rest day I did not know was the last. He was quiet, even for him. At the end of it, he held up one of the saint's own candles, which he should not have touched, and he turned it in the lamplight, and he said, "Father, this one is warm. They are all cold, but this one is warm. Why is it warm?" I told him to put it down. I told him the saint's warmth was in it, a blessing, a mercy. I told him the words my mother told me, and he looked at me too long, the way he looked at things, and he put it down, and he did not say anything else, and I went home, and I slept, because the klaxon wakes us at the 4th bell. You must understand about the quota, because the quota is the God we actually serve. Whatever God they tell us is upstairs. Every rendering vault answers to the tally engine, a brass tower of dials and counterwheels and paper scrolls that stands at the head of the hall, tended by an overseer of the mortuary clergy who is changed every few years and who never learns our names. The engine knows how many bodies came down, it knows how much tallow went up, it knows the ratio that must hold between the two, and that ratio is sacred and it must never fall, because if Calenhout renders less light than it burns, the saint sits in shadow, and the faithful above lose their faith, and the pilgrim fleets stop coming, and a shrine world that no one comes to die on is a world that dies. When I was young, the bodies came faster than we could render them, and the carts backed up on the rail, and we worked extra bells, and the quota was easy. The great wars in the void send their harvest down to us, you see. A bad year up there is a good year in the vaults. But there had been peace, of a kind, in my sector of the stars. Fewer pilgrims dying, fewer carts, and the quota does not care why. The quota only falls, and the overseer's dials creep toward the red, and the overseer grows afraid because his masters do not forgive a falling light. The first overseer I remember was an old man who wept. I did not understand it then. The dials crept toward the red in a long, quiet decade, and he would stand before the tally engine in the cold hours when he thought no one watched and his shoulders would shake. He was gone within the year, and a new one came, harder, younger, and the carts began to arrive more full than the rail above could honestly have sent, and I did not ask where the extra dead were coming from, because the quota was met again, and a met quota is a closed mouth. The second overseer lasted longer. The third is the one who is here now, and his dials have been creeping toward the red for 3 years. And last winter, I saw his hands shake exactly the way the first one's shoulders shook, and I thought, so it comes round again. So the light runs short again. And I felt the old fear that I could not name, and the fear that lives under the work, the fear that a falling light is a thing that must be fed. I watched 3 overseers grow afraid in my lifetime. I watched what fear made them do, and I told myself it was not my concern because I am a chandler, and a chandler stirs the vat, and the vat is filled by others, and what is not your task is not your sin. I believed that for 40 years it is the most comfortable thing I have ever believed, and the most expensive. Once, only once, I saw the upper world. A pipe had burst in the high crypts, and they needed hands that knew the rendering channels to clear the cooled tallow before it set in the joints, and I was sent up with a work gang under guard. We climbed for 2 bells, and at the top of a great shaft, through a grill that I was not meant to look through, but did, I saw the nave. I have no words equal to it, so I will give you the small ones. Gold, light, a ceiling so high and so bright that it was its own sky, and I understood for the first time that the word sky meant something real and not just a story my mother told. 10,000 candles burning on a single altar screen, and 10,000 more beyond it, and the whole vast golden throat of the place singing, an ocean of voices lifted up, and the smell, which after a lifetime of the vaults was so clean it hurt me. It actually hurt me, like cold water on a burn. And down a sweep of white stairs came the pilgrims, thousands of them, the old, the sick, the dying, carried on litters or walking on the arms of their children, every face turned up toward the light with a joy I had never once felt in my life. They had crossed the stars to die here. They were happy. They were so happy. I had always thought, in the small unexamined way I thought anything, that the pilgrims were brought here dead, that they died on their home worlds in the saint's grace, and their bodies were shipped to Calenhout as an honor, the way a relic is shipped. It had never once occurred to me in 40 years that they came here alive, that the dying came here still breathing, climbed those stairs on their own failing legs, or were carried up them by weeping children in order to die here, close to the light. The cathedral did not receive the dead, it received the living who had come to die, and it was very, very good at helping them along. I watched an old woman reach the bottom of the stairs and sink down and press her face to the cold floor and weep with gratitude, and the mortuary clergy lifted her gently, so gently, and carried her away through a door, and the door was a door I knew. It was a door that led down. It led to us. I did not understand what I had seen. Not then. I carried it back down into the dark, and I set it beside all the other things I did not let myself understand, and I stirred the vat, and the klaxon woke me at the fourth bell. The warm vat stood apart from the others at the cold end of the third vault, behind a rail none of us crossed. It was smaller than the rendering vats, a sealed iron drum the height of 2 men, and it was warm, in a hall where everything was cold iron and colder steam, where the chill got into your bones in the first hour and never left. The warm vat gave off a faint heat you could feel from the rail, like a banked fire, like a body in a bed. Frost grew on every pipe in that corner except the ones that fed the warm vat. Those were clear and beaded with sweat. I had wondered about it the way you wonder about the back of your own head, constantly and never. It was simply there. It had always been there. My mother had told me it was the saint's vat, that the saint's own tallow was rendered there by a slower and holier process, and that to approach it was to risk a blessing too strong for a common soul. I had kept my distance for 31 years. And then my son asked me why a candle was warm. I could not unhear it. The question got into me the way the cold got into me, slow and total. Why was the candle warm? Why was the vat warm? What is rendered slow and kept warm and yields a tallow that burns in the saint's own candles, the ones the clergy walk beside, the ones we may not touch? I began to watch the warm vat. I could not help myself, though I have promised you I would not use those soft words, so let me say it plain. I chose to watch it, a little more each shift, the way you choose to press a sore tooth with your tongue. I noticed things I had spent 30 years not noticing. The warm vat was never fed from the body rail like the others. Its shroud carts came down a separate way, by night, by the cold stair, only one at a time, and the bodies on them were not wrapped in the common gray. They were wrapped in white, the white of the pilgrims I had seen on the golden stairs, and they were strapped down, which the dead do not need to be. I noticed that the rendering of the warm vat took not hours but weeks, that the same sealed drum stayed warm and working for a whole season before its tallow was drawn off. I noticed that the clergy who tended it wore stoppers in their ears. I had thought that strange, and then I had thought nothing, because thinking was the one labor the vault did not require of me, and I was so tired, and the klaxon wakes us at the fourth bell. And one cold hour, when the overseer had gone to his rest and the vault was as empty as it ever became, I crossed the rail. There was a ledger chained to a stone desk beside the warm vat. A chandler can read, a little, enough for grades and weights and the seals on the shrouds. I opened it. It was a list of names. Not weights, not grades, names, in the careful hand of the mortuary clergy, column after column, page after page, going back further than the paper should have survived. Beside each name, a date of arrival, and a second date, blank for most, filled for some. And beside the filled dates, a single word I knew from the cooling halls, rendered. But the blanks. There were so many blanks, names that had arrived and not been rendered, going back years, going back decades, names that had come down through the door I had seen at the bottom of the white stairs, the door the old woman was carried through and had simply remained. Living, the ledger seemed to say, for it tracked them. A column headed condition, and in it, beside the unrendered names, the same word over and over in the clergy's tidy script. Sleeping, sleeping, sleeping. The dead give their light. I had said it 10,000 times. We tend the flame. The flame must never gutter. I stood beside the warm vat with the ledger open in my hands, and the warmth came off the iron and touched my face like breath, and for the first time in 40 years I let myself finish the thought I had spent a lifetime not finishing. The vat was warm because what was inside it was not dead. I read the names for a long time. I do not know why. Perhaps because a name in a ledger is the last proof that a person was a person and not yet a quantity of light, and someone ought to read them just once before the column marked them rendered. No one ever had. I could tell. The spine of the book cracked when I opened it to the early pages, the pages from before my grandfather, pages no living hand had turned. I should have closed the ledger. I should have gone home and eaten my paste and said the words and slept and let the klaxon wake me. A wiser man, a kinder man to himself, would have done that. I had done it for 40 years. I had a great deal of practice. Instead, I took a lamp from its hook and I went down. There was a stair behind the warm vat, narrow and wet and black, that I had taken for a drainage shaft. It was not. It went down past iron doors, sealed and frosted, more of them than I could count, and the cold grew and grew until my breath came out as fog and my lamp guttered and I cupped it the way you cup a candle against the wind, and I went down. I do not know how far. The vaults of Calanot go down 9,000 years. Time is measured in depth here as much as in bells. With every door I passed, I told myself I would turn back at the next one, and at the next one I told myself the same, and the warmth of the vat above was long gone, and the cold was a living thing now, and still I went down, because my son had looked at a candle too long, and now so had I, and there is no climbing back up out of a thing once you have truly seen it. There were sounds on the cold stair that I have not been able to forget, not screams. I could have borne screams. It was the soft machine sounds of tending, the hiss of cold gas through valves, the tick of the pulse engines, and under all of it, so faint I told myself I imagined it, a sound like a great many people breathing very slowly in their sleep. A whole congregation breathing as one, down in the dark, dreaming whatever the slowed dream. I have heard that sound every night since in the moment before my own sleep takes me, and I have wondered whether my father is one of the breaths in it, and whether he dreams, and whether the dream is kind, and I have prayed that it is, though I no longer know to what. At the bottom there was a door that stood open. And beyond it, there was a hall, and in the hall there was a light, soft and cold and blue, and I went in. They were in glass. Coffins of frosted glass, rank on rank, receding into the blue dark further than my lamp could throw, as many as there were candles in the cooling halls, as many as there were stars I would never see, and in each one a sleeper. I could see them dimly through the frost, the way you see a face through a frozen window. The old, the sick, the dying, the pilgrims who had crossed the stars to die in the saint's light and had been carried so gently through the door that led down. They were not dead. The glass was clouded with the slow fog of breath. A pulse light glowed faint and blue at the head of each coffin, ticking, slow, so slow, one beat for every dozen of mine. They had been slowed, not killed, slowed almost to stopping, and kept and stored, a harvest held against the years when the carts ran empty and the quota fell and the saint would otherwise sit in shadow. I understood the stoppers in the clergy's ears now. I understood the white shrouds and the straps and the weeks of slow, warm rendering. I understood why the saint's own candles were warm to the touch, why my son had turned one in the lamplight and felt the heat of it, and asked me why, and why I had not been able to answer, except with the words my mother gave me. A body rendered dead gives a cold, hard tallow and a clean, pale light. A body rendered living gives something else. The clergy had learned across 9,000 patient years that terror renders richest of all, that a soul taken slowly, awake, aware, burning by inches, yields a tallow no honest death can match, and a flame that burns longer and brighter, and is fit, and only fit, for the saint. This was the reserve. This was how the light never guttered even in the years of peace, the years when too few came down dead. When the dead ran short, Calenhout did not let its faithful go dark. It reached into its cellar of sleepers, and it took one, and it carried them warm to the warm vat, and it rendered them slow, alive, into the saint's own candles, the warmest tallow from the warmest flesh, the brightest light from the longest scream. I stood among them with my failing lamp, and I understood at last what I had spent my life making, not candles, patience, a vast and patient machine for turning hope into light, one sleeping pilgrim at a time, forever. I would have left then. I think I could have lived after a fashion, even knowing. Men live knowing all kinds of things. I had proved that with my whole life. But I walked the rows. I do not know why. To bear witness, perhaps, since no one else ever had, or ever would, and the lamp passed over the pulse lights and the frosted glass and the dim, slowed faces, and I read the small brass nameplates because a chandler reads weights and grades and seals, and now, it seemed, names. And I found my father. He had gone to his rendering when I was 19. I had carried his shroud to the rail with my own hands. I had said the words over the cart, "The dead give their light, we tend the flame." I had grieved him and burned a candle for him in the wall shrine, a candle I had made. And I had thought, at least he is in the light now. At least there is that. He was not rendered. He was here, sleeping. His face behind the frost was the face I had carried down to the rail, only older, because they age. They age so slowly in the cold, but they age, which means some part of them is still living the years away in there, dreaming, waiting. The pulse light ticked at his head, slow, slow. The clergy had taken him and told us he was rendered and laid him here against a lean year, and one day when the quota fell far enough they would carry him warm to the warm vat, and he would become the saint's own light, and a chandler who did not know would skim his fat from the top of the drum and never know. I thought of his rendering. I had stood at the rail and watched the cart take his shroud, and I had said the words, and I had believed, with whatever a 19-year-old believes, that I was watching my father become light. I had been proud. That is the part I cannot put down. I had been proud that my father would burn in the saints' chapels, that strangers would pray by a flame that was him, that he had not been wasted. We are taught from the cradle that the worst thing a person can be on Calenhout is wasted. And so they had given me a false rendering and a false grief to keep me proud and quiet, and they had laid my father here in the cold to wait his turn. And the cruelty of it was not that they had killed him. They had not killed him. The cruelty was that they had not, and that one day they would, slowly, and that on that day, a chandler at the warm vat would skim the rich warm tallow and feel nothing but the satisfaction of a quota met. I put my hand on the glass. It was so cold it burned. I said his name. The fog of my breath bloomed and faded on the glass between his face and mine, my living breath, his slowed and stolen one, and he did not wake, and I knelt there in the blue dark for a length of time I cannot give you, because down there are no bells. I climbed back up. The klaxon does not care what you have seen. It wakes you at the fourth bell. I have thought in the long shifts since about all the things a man might do with what I know. I might climb to the upper world and stand in that golden singing nave and cry out the truth to the weeping pilgrims on the white stairs. I would not last a sentence. The mortuary clergy would carry me away so gently, and I would be slowed and stored, and one lean year I would become a candle, and the singing would not falter for even one note. The truth is not a weapon here. It is only another body for the vat. I might refuse the work, set down the pole, but the pole would be picked up by a younger chandler with blistered palms who believes the blisters are the saint testing his devotion, and the only difference my refusal would make is that I would go to the glass coffins a little sooner, and my son a little sooner after me. I have turned these over so many times in the long circles around the vat that they have worn smooth like the handle of the pole, and I have come to understand the shape of the trap I am in, which is the same trap my father was in, and his mother and hers, 300 years of us walking the circle. It is not that we cannot see the truth. Some of us see it. It is that seeing changes nothing, and so the seeing becomes its own punishment, a weight added to the cold, and the kindest thing the vaults offer is the chance to never see it all. I had that chance. I had 40 years of it. I spent it, and I cannot give it back to myself, and I would not, because a man who has seen his father in the glass and chosen to keep his eyes open afterward is at least, in that one small thing, awake. There is so little down here that is mine. My grief is mine. My knowing is mine. I will not render those down for anyone. My son, Bremen still pulls wicks beside me. He still looks at things too long. He has not found the ledger, and I will burn it before he does. I have decided that much. I will give him that much, the same blindness my father tried to give me, which I now understand was not cowardice. It was the only mercy a man down here has to give. He let me believe my work was holy. He let me sleep. He could have told me, and he chose instead to let me have my whole life unbroken, and then he let himself be carried to the glass so that I would never have to know he had not gone to the light. I had called that cowardice in my heart all these years, that he never seemed to fight anything. I take it back. I take it all back. He fought the only war there was to fight down here. He fought to let me not know. So I stand at the vat, and I lift the ladle, and the dead give their light, and I tend the flame, and the flame must never gutter, and now I know exactly what those words cost, and I say them anyway, because the alternative is to make my son carry the knowing, and I would rather carry it myself until they carry me. There is a thing I do now at the end of each shift that I did not do before. When the cooling halls are empty and the lamps are turned low, I take one candle. Not a saint's own candle. I will not touch those again, not knowingly, not ever. I take a common candle, a long pale one for the common prayers, made from a common shrouded body that came down honestly dead, and I carry it to the little wall shrine in our dwelling where my grandfather's portrait hangs among the melted stubs. And I light it, And I do not say the words of the vault, I say the names instead. My father's name, the names from the ledger that I could hold in my memory before I burned it, as many as I could carry, an old woman who wept on a golden floor, 1,000 sleepers in the blue dark who crossed the stars for a light that was only ever going to be them. I say the names until the candle gutters, and I watch it die, because down here we are the people who make the light, and we are not permitted to waste it. And I waste it anyway. One candle. Every shift. It is the only blasphemy on Callanhout, and it is mine. And it is so small that no tally engine will ever miss it. You think a candle is a small thing. So do I now. I think it is the smallest thing there is. I think it is one stolen breath of light against a dark that has been winning for 9,000 years and will go on winning long after I am tallow. But I light it. Every shift, I light it, and for as long as one man down in the dark still knows the names and still wastes one small flame in saying them, the machine has not finished its work, not quite, not all the way. The dead give their light. I tend the flame. And the flame, the small one, the one that is only mine, I will let it gutter when I choose, and not one moment before,